It's the Brad and John Show.
It is the Brad and John Show. I am Brad. That is John. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Brad.
Today's date is November 26th. This is A Block for those of you listening into the future on our podcast or on our YouTube channel. We do this live every Monday through Friday from 7 to 8 o'clock. You can stream it live, listen off air. This is an actual radio station. The reason I mention that is, John, you know why I do that, right?
Oh, why do you do that, Brad?
Because people take it more seriously if they think it's an actual radio station as of just a podcast. Because nowadays, everybody has a podcast, but not everybody has a radio
Everybody has
station.
a podcast, Brad. It's kind of ridiculous. But you know what? People like to pretend that they're part of the media industry even when they're not. People like to pretend they're a, quote, entrepreneur even when they're not. I have a feeling we'll talk about that today.
I have a feeling it's probably in the top three. What John does is every single day he wakes up early. He puts together a list of all the important things that are going on in the state of Missouri. He puts together like the old school kind of, which is interesting because Drudge is out of it now. He's no longer involved with his Drudge Report anymore, correct?
I believe he's not a part of the operation anymore.
Anyway, we do like a Missouri, shouldn't say we, John does a Missouri version of Drudge Report. It's nothing fancy, just a bunch of links. And when I say a bunch of links, he labors hard over this. And it's interesting stuff that if you want to find out about things going on in the state of Missouri, politics, governance, sometimes crazy stuff, sometimes sports, sometimes wacky stories. We get those every once in a while. John puts together. Then we bring this guy in. What's your name again, sir?
I'm Casey Kasem.
And he starts it off with...
In third place...
In case you were wondering about former St. Louis Public School Superintendent Keisha Scarlett, Brad, she has landed on her feet. Now, Brad, you'll recall that Miss Scarlett was relieved of her duties as superintendent when a number of contracts that she doled out to friends and acquaintances were unveiled. And Miss Scarlett was relieved of her duties. She's currently suing St. Louis Public Schools. She says that she hasn't really gotten a good detailed reason of why she was dismissed. But Brad, she has appeared to land on her feet because according to Keisha, she has started her own consulting company, Brad. She is an entrepreneur, according to herself. And according to a post on LinkedIn, she started a company called Woven Consulting, and she is the CEO.
Wow.
She will become a trusted partner in cultivating leadership excellence, fostering innovation, and driving meaningful change. Brad, aren't you happy to see that Keisha has landed a CEO role at at a brand new startup, Brad? Isn't that inspirational?
Well, John, I can see how this is going to happen. That you said that all of her people that she brought from Seattle, they pretty much all left, correct? Is that pretty much
Yeah,
it?
most of them have. Some of them are still there, but most have left.
Okay, so what's going to happen is some of those people that she brought in from Seattle are going to end up with great superintendent jobs around the country, and then they're going to hire her as a consultant. See how this works, John?
Brad, you stole my thunder because you and I think exactly alike on this. Let's say of all her friends that she's made back from her days up in Seattle, all she needs, Brad, is 5 superintendents or 5 people in position of contracting power throughout the country to give her $49,000 each, because let's say most districts have a $50,000 limit to get board approval. Brad, 49 times 5 is what, $245,000 a year?
Yeah.
She can put together one business efficiency plan. You know, she's the trusted partner in cultivating leadership excellence. She could put together one plan, repurpose it 5 different times, and make $249,000 a year.
And not only that, but she can turn that into like an industry where she could start like a course where she could say, hey, find out how you can make lots of money consulting educational institutions, and then she could sell that online. What do you think, John?
I think it's a great plan. And I think this is also instructional. I said 249 a minute ago. I should have said 245. That's the OCD in me, Brad, going back and correcting my statement. I think it's really instructive. I don't think people throughout the state of Missouri need to go through and skim the story because I think we just summarized it together, Brad, pretty well. But I would just remind particularly younger folks who listen to our show, I think if you have your identity enmeshed, ingrained, one and the same as your job title, you would probably tempted, after you lose your job, you would probably be tempted to rush to LinkedIn and manufacture some sort of a CEO title or some sort of a company. Blythe Bernard, by the way, from the Post-Dispatch brought us the story today. And she points out that the company Woven Consulting doesn't actually exist in terms of it hasn't been registered by any Secretary of State that Blythe Bernard has checked into. But Brad, I think there's young people who find their value, their identity inextricably linked to their job title. And when that happens, it doesn't matter if you're 22 or if you're like Keisha Scarlett and you're 50, you might be tempted to manufacture some sort of a CEO title to make yourself feel better because you care so much about what other people think. Brad Hildebrand was fired on Christmas Day. Now, if there was a version of LinkedIn back then, Brad wouldn't have rushed to LinkedIn and say, after much deliberation this holiday season, I've decided to stake a claim to this industry on my own, and I'm creating my own. No. You say, hey, between jobs, I'm looking for jobs. I'm open to work. Anyway, I think it's a good ego check. It's a good reminder to young people. You don't have to be like Keisha. Brad, in 1 year, do you think that Woven Consulting will be proving their thought leadership? Or do you think that somebody's just going to hire Keisha, buy another bill of goods, and then be in for another rude awakening?
John, I thought for sure what you're going to say, which if I got a story we can talk about maybe in the B block, I thought for sure you were going to say she was going to Chicago to work in the Chicago school district there because
she's too accomplished to go there. And because to get hired there, you have to get rid of at least $2.2 million worth of taxpayer dollars.
Boy, there's an
and
article.
Keisha's total hasn't been that high. She's working up to that though, Brad. Hopefully she's going to go to maybe Houston or find like another like deep blue city where she can wreck.
There's an article we need to talk about that's coming out of Chicago with the schools, and it's just one of these things. It's just like, holy cow. Once again, this is the school district that wasn't one of the high schools where when they did the state testing, they found no student who was proficient in math. Remember that story that came out?
I don't remember that 0 students were proficient in math, but that's true. They need another version of Joe Clark, the guy from Lean on Me. Wasn't that Chicago? The guy that went around with the baseball bat?
I don't know. I still know people in education, and I get myself in trouble for saying these kind of things because every time I say it, you don't know what it's like. You have no idea. Okay, I do know what it's like. It sucks, and our education is not doing well. I mean, why are we? Go back and watch. What's the? It was on. One of the streaming channels. It was like many seasons, and it was Jeff Daniels, who is an excellent actor. Sometimes you think of him as Dumb and Dumber, but excellent actor. And he did the thing called Newsroom. And the very first episode, he ticks off all the problems in the United States, where we're ranked in education, and all this kind of stuff. And it's truly sad when you look at where we're at in education. We're like, I don't know, in the world, we're like 49th or something crazy thing like that. I mean, where's all the high tech people going to come from? You got Elon Musk, who is not educated here. He was educated in South Africa. Maybe we should go look at how those schools in South Africa run if they turn out people like Elon Musk. You know what I'm saying?
Well, this segment is not sponsored by the Missouri NEA.
Okay, so we move on to
I guess we could ditch our appeal to them, Brad.
We'll move on to number 2.
Up a notch to number 2.
97.1 FM Talk had a special guest host yesterday, and that is your friend, Brad, Mike Elam. He had 2 fascinating guests on. One is Chad Perkins, the new Speaker Pro Tem of the Missouri House. He also had Kurt Bahr on. We'll go in reverse order. Kurt Bahr, Brad, I'll cut the entire interview down to about 10 seconds. We're going to have more early voting places next year, okay? Everybody just get off Kurt Bahr's back. Kurt has heard it. He knows that people want more voting locations. We're going to have more. They did throw a little dig in at MoDOT, Brad, for tearing up the highway and the overpass and the roads right before the early voting started. So that was one interview that Mike did was with, was with Kurt Bahr. The other one I want to draw your attention to is Chad Perkins, who's one of the leaders in the Missouri House, went through Amendment 3. And why, excuse me, Brad, I got to clear my throat here.
You sound like me, John.
I know. Sorry, I had a little frog in my throat. That's what Miss Piggy used to say. But anyway, Brad, Chad Perkins went through Amendment 3 and gave the rationale of what you can expect the legislature to do. And one of the things that he said is important about Amendment 3 is that it's up to the legislature to go in and define what the term fetal viability is. Chad Perkins says if some of these terms aren't defined by the legislature, then they will be defined by the court system. Now, would you rather have judges defining what fetal viability is? Would you rather have a judge decide what the health of the mother is? Or would you rather have the legislature define that? I say the legislature. If I was a liberal, I'd probably say the courts. So they talked about that, Brad. They talked about Brad Hildebrand. They talked about term limits. They talked about the fact that Chad says he's never going to become a lobbyist when he leaves the legislature. Talked about gun control legislation, Brad, and fighting back against that. So I have timestamps up on my website today.
They did not talk about me.
They did, Brad.
No, they didn't.
I have a timestamp. It's at the 28-minute and 30-second mark, Brad.
What did they say?
So anyway, I would suggest folks go take a listen. Brad and everyone else listening, I run a very egalitarian website, Brad. If you want to know what they said about you, I think you can go listen. As I like to say to you, Brad, G-I-F-Y. Google it for yourself.
John, you're baiting me. They didn't bring me up. Why would they bring me up on that? Why would Mike Elam bring me up?
Well, I could probably go into the YouTube file and just duplicate this. But we run a very egalitarian show here, Brad. And if you want to hear what they said about you, you can go to the timestamp and listen.
Okay, John, I will go listen. And by the way, I will be upfront and say this. Mike Elam is a multi-talented guy. He is very good on the radio. And what's interesting about Mike is he's one of those guys that the guy you hear on the radio is the guy you sit across from at a dinner or the guy you meet at a trivia night. It's the same guy. And you and I have talked about this before, that there are some people that, like, for example, we've heard the stories that going back to the days when she was still running for president, that Kamala Harris came off as this nice, giggly person, and her giggly laugh. And when you see her in action, she was like horrible to work with, and she was terrible, and she'd yell at people. It's just like, you want to hear an interesting thing?
I do.
Well, we'll talk about in B Block. Remind me to tell you what Armstrong and Getty said about Dr. Oz, which I found very fascinating.
By the way, we just got a text from Ron Jacober that says, don't trust you about split personalities. What's that about?
Never mind. Okay, are we done with that one? Is that one done?
We're done with number 2. Hey, 28 minutes, 30 seconds. You could hear a Brad Hildebrand reference. Go ahead, Brad.
Okay, here we go. Number 1.
The number 1.
I come bearing bad news for you, Brad. I started to say Brad news for you. I come bearing bad news for you, Brad. I know you have wanted for years to take your taxpayer money and support gender transition for prisoners. But I got some bad news, Brad. Thanks to a judge here in backward Missouri, no longer will your tax dollars be considered to pay for gender transition surgeries, Brad. More bad news. If you're a stage mom or a stage dad and you want a little bit of fame, you want to put your kid through a gender bender, gender mutilation surgery, you want them to get gender-affirming care because they happen to be going through a tough time and they're a little confused. Bad news, Brad. You say, John, I thought we settled this. I thought the legislature passed something in 2023. Brad, you're right. The legislature did. But as you can imagine, this has been tied up in the courts since then. And finally, a judge came out yesterday and said, no, Missouri will not allow gender mutilation surgeries, will not allow gender-affirming care, hormones for minors. A kid's got to wait until they're 18. And then when they're an adult, Brad, they can make a decision to have transsexual surgery, to have, top surgery, a.k.a. double mastectomy. Whatever they want to do to their body, they can do at 18. But, Brad, no longer, it appears for now, and I should point out, giant asterisk here, of course, the gender-affirming care industry is going to appeal this ruling. But for now, it looks like minors are safe in Missouri, Brad.
I don't understand this whole thing because I've had 4 kids, and obviously my kids are all fully grown now. You have kids who are young, okay? There are certain things that you are charged with as a parent that you have to do, and there are certain things that if kids, like, for example, you probably know this, back in my day of school, you got a headache, you went up to the nurse, she gave you a couple aspirin, right? You can't do that anymore.
Absolutely, yeah.
You can't do that anymore because the nurse at the school can no longer give out any kinds of drugs. Now, to the point where I don't know if any of your kids have any kind of medication they have to take to school or not. We won't go into that, but let's say they do. You have to fill out a form and all that kind of stuff that gives them permission to do that. You know what I'm saying?
I do. And today, in 2024, when your kid goes on a field trip, you have an additional field trip permission slip form that has to do with, can they take ibuprofen? Who can administer the ibuprofen? What time should it be given?
I know.
Things like this. So you're right. I mean, we're hyper vigilant about that. And it's easy to make jokes about this, Brad, and I'm as guilty as anybody. But we have kids in this state and in this country that really are confused. That, I mean, it's a really tough time for anybody when you're going through puberty. And to think that we should make decisions for kids when they're, 10, 11, 12, 13, that are going to last their entire life. And, it was pointed out in some of these pieces that representatives of the state said, you don't allow parents to buy minors alcohol at age 16 just because you say, well, I think they can handle it. And no analogy is perfect here, Brad, but I don't know. This is good news. And I would point out as well that Elon Musk tweeted about Andrew Bailey yesterday. He congratulated Andrew Bailey for this victory. And Elon Musk says, great, let's take this nationwide.
Can I bring up something about Elon Musk?
Please do.
Okay, you're a social media guy. You work Twitter very heavily, okay? And it's just like when I did at my candidate school on Saturday, where one of the pushbacks we get now if I try to sell someone advertising on the radio, they'll go, well, I can do social media. It's free. Well, it's not free, because if you consider your time is worth something, it's not free. And once again, a guy like Elon Musk, he's not tweeting this stuff out. You know what I'm saying? He's got someone who's following around with their phone, or maybe 2 or 3 people, and he's just saying something, or he's written something ahead of time. You know what I mean? It's not him tweeting.
I do know. Yeah, I do know. And also, Brad, I don't know if you've seen, there was a semi-viral clip that went out after the election that showed Donald Trump watching a Kamala Harris speech, and he had some folks around him, and he would say short, pithy phrases, and an attractive blonde female sitting next to him was transcribing it in tweets, and then she would turn her laptop and he would take a look at it and say, yeah, that's good. Yeah. And then she would hit post. Yeah, you're exactly right.
Once again, and I'm not trying to say I've been around. I still go back to the crazy thing. I go back to the crazy experience I had with Shaquille O'Neal out at the back in the day, the T.R. Hughes ballpark, where him and Albert Pujols were in a home run hitting contest for that ABC network show. Can you do what Shaquille can do? There was 2 people following him, literally tweeting as him. You know what I mean? Literally
of course,
following him. Hey, I just went into the ballpark here in St. Charles County. Oh, I'm going to hit a home run out of the park. I'm going to show that Albert Pujols that I can do it. He didn't do any of that. And he wasn't even dictating to them. They were just taking it upon themselves to be, quote unquote, Shaquille O'Neal as his persona on Twitter. You know what I'm saying?
And closer to home, if you were to go to any St. Louis corporation, good old St. Louis corporation here, that's of a certain size, and you follow them on LinkedIn, you follow the CEO or the VP on LinkedIn, and you said to them, hey, I saw your LinkedIn post about sustainability. That was awesome. They would smile and say, oh, yeah, thank you. They have no idea what was posted on LinkedIn. Exactly. Because somebody that works for them wrote it.
Right, exactly. Okay. Once again, John pulls back the curtain and shows you what goes on behind the scenes in corporate America, right?
I've written some interview answers for people, Brad. I think the statute of limitations has run out, where the folks actually saw it in print and called me and said, I really like that. I'm going to start actually saying that in my actual interview. And I said, well, thank you. I thought, I'm like, I thought that quote was very you. But and the people are like, especially, I would just say, non-native speakers are like, but when you say the coordination and collaboration, what do you mean? And, I define it. And then they say, oh, I like that. I'm going to be using that in the real interviews.
But see, what you could have said when you got that compliment from the CEO for something they didn't actually say, you could just throw back another CEO kind of compliment and said, well, I was just being forward-looking with my statements. Right?
That's exactly right. I'm just surrounded by good people.
Right. Okay. We have to take a break.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?